Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our next online lesson. Today, we're going to be learning about the global goals for sustainable development. Okay, so what are the global goals? In September 2015, 193 world leaders agreed to 17 global goals for sustainable development. If these goals are completed, it would mean an end to extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change by 2030. Our governments have a plan to save our planet. It's our job to make sure they stick to it. The global goals are only going to work if we fight for them, and you can't fight for your rights if you don't know what they are. We believe the goals are only going to be completed if we can make them famous. Okay, I've also attached the URL to the Global Goals website at the bottom of the page. You can see it there. If you want to visit the Global Goals website and find out more, then I definitely advise to do so. Okay, so the targets of the global goals. The first one being no poverty. Okay, by 2030, they want to eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere. Currently measured as people living on less than £1.25 a day. By 2030, they want to reduce at least by half the proportion of men, women, and children of all ages living in poverty in all its dimensions, according to national definitions. Okay? They want to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including floors, and by 2030 achieve substantial coverage of the poor and the vulnerable. Okay? By 2030, they want to ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and the vulnerable, have equal rights to economic resources as well as access to basic services, ownership and control over lands and other forms of 13 property, inheritance, natural resources, appropriate new technology, and financial services, including microfinance. By 2030, they want to build the resilience of the poor and those in vulnerable situations and reduce their exposure and vulnerability to climate related extreme events and other economic, social, and environmental shocks and disaster. They also want to ensure significant mobilization of resources from a variety of sources, including through enhanced development, cooperation, in order to provide adequate and predictable means for developing countries, in particular least developed countries, to implement programs and policy to end poverty in all its dimensions. And finally, to create sound policy frameworks at the national, regional, and international levels based on pro, poor, and gender sensitive development strategies to support accelerated investment in poverty actions. Okay, the next target is for zero hunger. Okay, by 2030, they want to end hunger and ensure access by all people, in particular the poor and people in vulnerable situations, including infants, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food all year round. Okay, by 2030, they want to end all forms of malnutrition, including achieving by 2025 the internationally agreed targets on stunting and wasting in children under 5 years of age, and address the nutritional needs of adolescent girls, pregnant and lactating women, and older persons. By 2030, they want to double the agricultural productivity and incomes of small scale food producers, in particular women, indigenous people, family farmers, pastoralists, and fishers, including through secure and equal access to lands, other productive resources and inputs, knowledge, financial services, markets, and opportunities for value, addition, and non farm employment. By 2030, they want to ensure sustainable food production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity and production, that help maintain ecosystems, that strengthen capacity for adaptation to climate change, extreme weather, drought, flooding, and other disasters that progressively improve land and soil quality. By 2020, they want to maintain the genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, and farmed and domesticated animals and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at the national, regional, and international levels, and promote access to and fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the utilization of genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge as internationally agreed. Increase investment, including through enhanced international cooperation in rural infrastructure, agricultural research and extension services, technology development, and plant and livestock gene banks in order to enhance agricultural productive capacity in developing countries, in particular least developed countries. Correct and prevent trade restrictions and distortions in world agricultural markets, including through the parallel elimination of forms of agricultural export subsidies and all export measures with equivalent effect, in accordance with the mandate of the Doha Development Round. Adopt measures to ensure the proper functioning of food commodity markets and their derivatives, and facilitate timely access to market information, including on food reserves, in order to help limit extreme food price volatility. Okay, the next target is good health and well-being. Okay, by 2030, they want to reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70%, 100,000 live births. By 2030, they want to end preventable deaths of newborns and children under 5 years of age, with all countries aiming to reduce neonatal mortality to at least as low as 12 per thousand live births, and under -5 mortality to at least as low as 25 per thousand live births. By 2030, they want to end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and neglected tropical diseases, and combat hepatitis, waterborne diseases, and other communicable diseases. By 2030, they want to reduce by one third premature mortality from non communicable diseases through prevention and treatment, and promote mental health and well being. Strengthen the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse and harmful use of alcohol. By 2020, halve the number of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents to 3.7. By 2030, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive healthcare services, including for family planning, information and education, and the integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. Achieve universal health coverage, including financial risk protection, access to quality essential healthcare services, and access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable essential medicines and vaccines for all. By 2030, substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemicals and air, water and soil pollution and contamination. Strengthen the implementation of the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in all countries as appropriate. Support the research development of vaccines and medicines for the communicable and non communicable diseases that primarily affect developing countries. provide access to affordable essential medicines and vaccines in accordance with the Doha Declaration on the TRIPS Agreement and Public Health, which affirms the right of developing countries to use the provisions in the agreement on trade related aspects of intellectual property rights regarding flexibility to protect public health and in particular provide access to medicines for all, substantially increase health financing and the recruitment, development, training, and retention of the health workforce in developing countries, especially in least developed countries and small island developing states. Strengthen the capacity of all countries, in particular developing countries, for early warning, risk reduction, and management of national global health risks. Okay, the next target is quality education. By 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and goal for effective learning outcomes. By 2030, ensure that all girls and boys have access to quality early childhood, development, care, and pre primary education so that they are ready for primary education. By 2030, ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, including university. By 2030, substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills, for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. By 2030, eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access to all levels of education and vocational training for the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and children in vulnerable situations. By 2030, ensure that all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, both men and women, achieve literacy and numeracy. By 2030, ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of culture, diversity, and of culture's contributions to sustainable development. Build and upgrade education facilities that are child disability and gender sensitive and provide safe, non-violent, inclusive, and effective learning environments for all. By 2020, substantially expand globally the number of scholarships available to developing countries, in particular least developed countries, small island developed states, and the African countries for enrollment in higher education, including vocational training and information and the communications technology, technical engineering, and scientific programs in developed countries and other developing countries. Okay, the next target is gender equality. Okay, gender equality. The targets are to end all forms of discrimination against all women and girls everywhere, eliminate all forms of violence against all women and girls in public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation, eliminate all harmful practices such as child, early, and forced marriage and female genital mutilation, recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of the public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and the promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family as nationally appropriate. Ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in political, economic, and public life. Ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights as agreed in accordance with the Programme of Action of the International Conference, Population and Development, and the Beijing Platform for Action and the outcome documents of their review conferences. Undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources, as well as access to ownership and control over lands and other forms of property, financial services, inheritance, and natural resources in accordance with national laws. Enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communications technology, to promote the empowerment of women. Adopt and strengthen sound policies and enforceable legislation for the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls at all levels. Okay, the next target is clean water and sanitation. The targets are: by 2030, achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. By 2030, achieve access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene for all and end open defecation, paying special attention to the needs of women and girls and those in vulnerable situations. By 2030, improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. By 2030, substantially increase water use efficiency across all sectors and ensure sustainable withdrawals and supply of fresh water to address water scarcity and substantially reduce the number of people suffering from water scarcity. By 2030, implement integrated water resources management at all levels, including through transboundary cooperation as appropriate. By 2020, protect and restore water related ecosystems, including mountains, forests, wetlands, rivers, aquifers, and lakes. By 2030, expand international cooperation and capacity building support to developing countries in water and sanitation related activities and programs, including water, harvesting, desalination, water efficiency, wastewater treatment, recycling, and reuse technologies. Support and strengthen the participation of local communities in improving water and sanitation management. Okay, the next target is affordable and clean energy. Okay, the targets are: by 2030, ensure universal access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services. By 2030, increase substantially the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. By 2030, double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency. By 2030, enhance international corporations to facilitate access to clean energy research and technology, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, and advanced and cleaner fossil fuel technology, and promote investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technology. By 2030, they want to expand infrastructure and upgrade technology for supplying modern and sustainable energy services for all in developing countries, in particular least developed countries, small island developing states, and landlocked developing countries, in accordance with their respective programs of support. Okay, and number 8, their target is decent work and economic growth. Okay, the targets are to sustain per capita economic growth in accordance with national circumstances and in particular at least 7% gross domestic product growth per annum in the least developed countries. Achieve higher levels of economic productivity through diversification, technological upgrading, and innovation, including through a focus on high value added and labor intensive sectors. Promote development orientated policies that support productive activities, decent job creation, entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation. and encourage the formalization and growth of micro, small, and medium sized enterprises, including through access to financial services. Improve progressively through 2030 global resource efficiency in consumption and production, and endeavour to decouple economic growth from environment degradation in accordance with the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, with developed countries taking the lead. By 2030, they want to achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and the persons with disabilities, and equal pay for work of equal value. By 2020, they substantially reduced the proportion of youth not in employment, education, or training. Take immediate and effective measures to eradicate forced labor and modern slavery and human trafficking, and secure the prohibition and elimination of the worst forms of child labor, including recruitment and the use of child soldiers, and by 2025, end child labor in all its forms. Protect labour rights and promote safe and secure working environments for all workers, including migrant workers, in particular women migrants and those in precarious employment. By 2030, devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture and products. Strengthen the capacity of domestic financial institutions to encourage and expand access to banking, insurance, and financial services for all. Increase aid for trade support for developing countries, in particular least developed countries, including through the enhanced integrated framework for trade-related technical assistance to least developed countries. By 2020, develop and operationalize a global strategy for youth employment and implement the Global Jobs Pact for the International Labour Organization. Okay, so now thank you for listening. So what we're going to do is continue with the rest of the targets in the next lesson. Okay, to finish off this lesson, please pause the video and watch the video on the global goals following the below link. Okay, thank you for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed the lesson and you've watched the video, and I will see you again soon.